There are sounds the world isn't supposed to hear, like a bone snapping in half, sharp and sudden, like a gunshot inside a church. That's what echoed through the abandoned gymnasium of Lincoln High. One brutal final crack, one sound that said everything had changed. In that split second, the universe seemed to hold its breath. Brandon Harrison's leg bent at an angle no leg should bend. His scream tore through the air like metal scraping glass. On the floor, Madison Pierce, 5'4", face streaked with tears and dirt, was curled like a spring, her right hand locked around his ankle, knuckles white with precision. She didn't flinch. She didn't blink. And with a voice that should have been shaking but wasn't, she whispered, "You wanted a dog? Dogs bite." But that moment of savage justice wasn't the beginning. No, it was the ending of something much older, much deeper, and we're not there yet. Because 30 minutes before that moment, Madison wasn't standing victorious. She was on her knees, on cold, dusty concrete, surrounded. The late afternoon sun leaked through the dirty windows of Lincoln's old gym like syrup, casting long golden shadows that made the 5 boys around her look like giants. Predators. Brandon stood at the center like a king, the self-declared ruler of a kingdom built on intimidation. "Lower," he ordered, his quarterback voice booming. At 6'3" and built like a freight train, he towered over Madison's small frame. "I said crawl like a dog, not kneel like you're praying." His tone dripped with cruelty, and the boys around him, Jake Morrison, Connor Williams, Ryan Turner, and Alex Coleman, howled with laughter like jackals circling a wounded lioness. Jake's phone was already recording. Of course it was. That's what he did. Document pain and dress it up in hashtags. Connor cracked his knuckles beside Madison, the sound sharp and threatening. Ryan and Alex flanked her from behind, forming a wall of muscle and menace. Escape wasn't an option. Not physically, not socially, not today. Madison's hands trembled as she lowered them to the filthy gym floor. It was rough, coated in grit and old sweat. Cold seeped through her jeans, through her palms, through her pride. Hanging just inches above her face, swaying from Brandon's fingers like a trophy, was her father's silver bracelet, the one they'd stolen from her gym bag that morning. It caught the light in a cruel flash like it was winking at her, like it remembered what it meant, even if the boys didn't. "This is what you get," Brandon sneered. "This is what happens when someone like you forgets your place." And the thing is, he believed that. They all did. That Madison was supposed to break, to submit, to be humiliated and erased. But Madison was remembering something else. The sound of her father's voice. The weight of that bracelet when he pressed it into her hand for the last time. The lessons drilled into her bones, not just for moments of violence, but for moments like this. Moments when silence can scream, when stillness is power, when the hunted becomes the hunter. And so she waited, coiled, ready. Because while the boys around her laughed and mocked and filmed their cruelty, none of them realized they were standing on a fault line. And Madison was the earthquake. It started like so many stories do, on a day that felt like it should be normal. The sun was rising just a bit too bright over the sleepy Colorado town, and Madison Pierce was adjusting her little brother's backpack outside the front doors of Lincoln High, trying to pretend that her stomach wasn't coiled with unease. "Stop bouncing," she murmured, tugging the straps on his shoulders. "You're not a kangaroo." Ethan grinned anyway. "I'm not bouncing," he said, then immediately bounced on his heels. "Do you think they'll like my Doctor Who shirt?" Madison forced a smile, even as her eyes swept over the unfamiliar brick building in front of them. "They'll love it," she said, because she needed him to believe it. Needed one of them to stay whole. Just be yourself. If only she'd known how wrong she was. 7 minutes into her first lunch period, Madison's tray was wobbling in her hands as she scanned the cafeteria for a place to sit. The voices around her were loud and fast, echoing through the high ceilings like overlapping thunder. That's when she heard it. A choking sound, sharp and desperate. She froze. Then it came again, louder, wet, ugly. In the far corner, just outside the boys' bathroom, a crowd was forming. That kind of crowd. The one that smells blood. She didn't think, didn't hesitate. She pushed through the wall of students, her tray crashing to the floor behind her. Forgotten. The moment she broke the circle, her breath caught in her throat. A boy was on his knees in front of a toilet. Skinny. Pale. Maybe a freshman. She would learn later his name was Nathan Chen. But in that moment, all she saw was a child being held down, his face nearly submerged in the water, his arms flailing wildly. Brandon Harrison had his hand clamped on the back of Nathan's head, forcing it down. Water sloshed over the rim. "Drink it all, toilet boy," Brandon laughed, his voice casual, cold. "This is what happens when you don't move fast enough in the hallway." The other boys roared with laughter. Jake Morrison had his phone up, steady as ever. Someone started chanting, "Chug, chug, chug." And Nathan, he was turning purple. Madison moved. She didn't plan it. Her shoulder slammed into Brandon's ribs with surprising force, knocking him sideways into the metal divider between stalls. Nathan collapsed in a coughing, sputtering heap, soaking wet and gasping. She dropped beside him, one hand on his back. "Breathe," she said, steadying his panic. "Just breathe. You're okay now." That's when Brandon recovered, his face twisted with rage as he lunged toward her. "You stupid." He didn't finish. Madison pivoted, just like her father had taught her, using Brandon's momentum to spin him off balance. Her palm struck his chest, redirecting his charge into the cold tile wall. He hit it face first with a sickening smack. Silence, and then Jake's phone reappeared, already recording. "She attacked him," someone yelled. "The new girl just hit Brandon Harrison." Jake had only caught the end, just enough to spin the story, just enough to erase Nathan's suffering, just enough to paint Madison as the villain. And within hours, the internet followed suit. "New girl attacks star quarterback" blared across every social feed. The video spread like wildfire. The comments weren't kind. The school's administration didn't ask for context. They saw a girl striking a boy, a new student laying hands on their prized athlete. And Brandon? Brandon leaned into the role of victim like it was second nature. Bloody nose, shaken voice, quiet tears in the nurse's office. Nathan stayed silent, too afraid, too ashamed, too broken. The punishment? There wasn't one. For Brandon? But Madison? She got an official warning and the beginning of something far worse. Brandon's football scholarship offers began to disappear, one by one. College scouts didn't want drama, especially not the kind that made their quarterbacks look weak, even if it was true, even if he started it. The optics were bad. He blamed Madison. And Brandon Harrison never lost quietly. At first, the harassment came in subtle waves. Gum in her hair during English class. Her locker defaced with words that made the janitor pause and sigh before scrubbing them off. Someone kept ordering pizzas to her aunt's house at 3 a.m., every night for a week. The delivery drivers started to smirk when they rang the bell. Madison said nothing. She kept her head down. She'd been taught that strength was silence, that real power was restraint. Her father's voice echoed in her mind like scripture. "Control is real strength, Maddie. Anyone can throw a punch. It takes a warrior to know when not to." But it didn't stop there. It escalated. It always escalates. One day, Connor Williams cornered Ethan by the water fountain. "Hey, freak brother," he sneered, shoving him hard enough that water soaked his Doctor Who shirt. "You deaf like your sister is stupid?" Madison started to rise from her seat, rage surging, but Ethan looked at her, eyes red but defiant, and shook his head. "Not now. Not here." That night, he told her quietly, "If you fight my battles, it'll just get worse. I can handle it." But he couldn't. None of them could. A week later, the Instagram account appeared, Madison the Monster. It featured photoshopped images of her face on grotesque bodies, each more disturbing than the last. The comment sections were pure poison. Freak, mutant, should have drowned Brandon instead. Her classmates laughed behind their phones. Teachers said nothing. The few who might have spoken up stayed silent, especially Grace Mitchell. Kind eyes, hushed apologies scribbled on sticky notes. But Grace was dating Ryan Turner, one of Brandon's closest friends. Loyalty had its price. Even her mother didn't know. She couldn't. Madison kept it hidden like a wound stitched under her clothes. Her mom worked back-to-back shifts at the hospital, came home dead-eyed, barely awake. She didn't need one more thing to carry. So Madison stayed quiet. She deleted her social media. She walked with her head down. She waited, hoped it would pass. But they weren't finished with her. Not even close. It wasn't just about a video anymore. It was about breaking her, about reminding everyone who held the power and what happened when someone tried to take it away. And the thing that finally made Madison stop hoping was a bracelet, a simple piece of silver with her father's initials engraved inside. The one thing that still made her feel safe, seen, connected to the man who taught her strength. The morning she realized it was gone, ripped from her gym bag, stolen without shame, was the moment everything began to shift. When she saw Brandon twirling it around his finger in the hallway later that day, wearing it like a trophy, she didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just looked at him and said quietly, "Nice bracelet." Brandon smirked. "Found it," he said. "Finders keepers, right?" Jake laughed. Connor high-fived him. "And Madison?" She nodded once, said nothing, but something deep inside her, the part she'd kept quiet for so long, stirred. And that something was done being silent. Madison hadn't cried in weeks. Not when her locker was painted with slurs. Not when her classmates whispered behind her back or pointed at her in the hallways. Not even when her teachers looked through her like she wasn't worth defending. But the day she realized the bracelet was gone, the one her father gave her on his deathbed, something inside her cracked wide open. Not with tears, not with rage, with silence. That cold, heavy kind of silence that doesn't scream. It waits. She'd kept it hidden in her gym bag, wrapped in soft cloth in the smallest inner pocket. It wasn't flashy, just silver, worn from time and love, engraved with her father's initials. It had followed him through 3 tours in Afghanistan, through his battle with cancer, through every hospital bed and final breath. "For my warrior princess," he'd whispered, pressing it into her hand when he could barely lift his own. "So you'll always have me with you." And now it was gone. At lunch, Brandon leaned against the vending machine like he owned gravity itself. Her bracelet hung from his wrist, catching the light like it didn't belong to a dead man. "Looking for something?" he asked, voice like broken glass. Madison's eyes didn't leave the silver. "That's mine." Brandon held it up, grin sharp as a blade. "Was yours. Now it's just something I found." Jake snorted. Connor high-fived him. Ryan didn't even look at her. "And Alex?" He watched quietly from the edge, not laughing, not stopping it. She reported it, of course. First to her gym teacher, who shrugged. "I didn't see anything, sorry." Then to the vice principal, who smiled without warmth. "These things happen. Maybe you misplaced it?" His eyes never quite met hers. Madison walked out of the office with fists clenched and lungs full of fire. It wasn't just the theft. It was the way everyone acted like it didn't matter. Like the last piece of her father wasn't worth noticing. Like she wasn't. That afternoon, she found Ethan sitting alone behind the bleachers. He was shaking, eyes red-rimmed and shoulders hunched like the sky had dropped on him. His Doctor Who shirt was stretched and damp. "What happened?" she asked, kneeling beside him. "I'm okay," he whispered, his voice thin and tight. "I'm okay. I'm okay." He wasn't. She took him home and helped him change out of his wet clothes. Only then did she notice the blood under his fingernails, tiny red crescents where he'd clawed at something. "Ethan," she said, but he wouldn't meet her eyes. Later that night, she found out the truth. It was all on Jake's Instagram story, already with over 10,000 views. A grainy video of Ethan being shoved into the equipment closet, the door slamming, the boys laughing, his muffled cries echoing through the darkness. The comments were merciless. "Runs in the family. Closet crybaby. Weak just like his sister." She watched the video twice. Then she turned off her phone and stared at the photo of her father on her dresser. It was the one where he was in uniform, grinning with his arm around her shoulders and the bracelet still on his wrist. She studied the eyes of the man who had taught her everything she knew about discipline, about restraint, about being better. "I tried," she whispered. "I tried to stay calm. I tried to be better. I followed the rules." The photo didn't respond, but in her mind, she could almost hear his voice again. "Sometimes, baby girl, the only way to stop a bully is to show them what real strength looks like." Her phone buzzed, unknown number, but she knew who it was. She didn't need the name. "Tomorrow, 3 p.m. Old Jim. Come alone. Or the video of your brother crying goes everywhere. Maybe now you'll learn your place." Attached, a still of Ethan, sobbing in the dark. She didn't reply right away. She just stood there, staring, breathing. Then she typed 2 words, "I'll be there." She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she went to the garage, the one her father had turned into a training space years ago. The heavy bag still hung from the ceiling, the same canvas bag her little fists had pounded against since she was 8 years old. She wrapped her hands, tight, clean, just like he taught her. Fighting is ugly, he used to say, circling her like a coach. That's why we train, so if we ever have to fight, we end it fast. We don't let it drag. We don't let it hurt more than it has to. Jab, cross, hook. Again, cross, hook. Her fist slammed into the bag until her shoulders burned, until her breath came in fire, until her focus narrowed to the rhythm of impact. But what if they deserve to get hurt? She'd asked him once, years ago, when a boy in her class had pulled Ethan's chair out and made him cry. Her father had paused, looked her square in the eye. Then you make sure they learn the lesson, but you stop once they've learned it. We fight to protect, never to punish. Uppercut, knee, elbow. She repeated the drills until sweat soaked through her clothes, until every muscle in her body remembered what it was capable of. Then she stood in front of the mirror, looked at her own reflection, and saw not a victim, but a weapon tempered by love. The next day crawled by like honey poured over broken glass. Every class felt like static, every hallway echo, every glance a ghost. She didn't talk, she didn't smile, she watched the clock, tick, tick, tick. At 2:55 p.m., she stood outside the old gym. The air was still, heavy. The building had been closed for years, supposedly under renovation, but really just forgotten. Perfect for what they wanted, a place without witnesses. Her phone was already recording in her pocket. She'd learned that lesson from Brandon himself. As she reached for the handle, a voice grabbed her arm. "Don't go," Grace Mitchell whispered, eyes wide. "Please, Madison. I overheard Ryan. They're planning something bad, really bad." Madison didn't flinch. "They have a video of my brother." Grace's face crumpled. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I wish I could stop them." "You can't," Madison said softly. "Not this time." Then she looked Grace in the eye and said the words that had been building for weeks, carved out of every bruise, every insult, every tear that never fell. "Running doesn't work. Being quiet doesn't work. Being good doesn't work. Maybe it's time to try something else." And with that, she pushed the gym door open, not with fear, but with purpose. Because this time, Madison Pierce wasn't walking in as the victim. She was walking in as the storm. The old gym smelled like dust and forgotten dreams. Madison stepped inside, sneakers silent on the scuffed wooden floor. Light filtered through the grimy windows in streaks, slicing the space into shafts of gold and shadow. At the center stood Brandon Harrison, tall and smug, the silver bracelet dangling from his wrist like bait on a hook. Around him, Jake, Ryan, Connor, Alex, 5 boys forming a circle, their laughter already thick in the air. "She actually showed," Connor muttered. "Told you she would," Brandon said, cocky and cruel. "She's too proud. Thinks she's going to save her brother with a speech or something." Jake raised his phone. "Let's get this party started." Madison walked forward, her shoulders relaxed, hands at her sides. She stopped just at the edge of their circle, her eyes locking on Brandon's. "Let's get this over with," she said, her voice steady. Brandon pulled out his phone and turned the screen to her. There was Ethan, curled up in the dark closet, eyes swollen, voice trembling, timestamp blinking in the corner. "We've got all afternoon," Brandon said. "And you're going to learn what happens when people forget their place." "What do you want?" Madison asked quietly. Brandon's smile widened. "First, you're going to apologize to all of us for attacking me, for ruining my future, for existing." She didn't move. "On your knees," he ordered. The words hung in the air like poison. Madison felt their eyes hungry for her humiliation. Slowly, never looking away from Brandon, she lowered herself to the floor. The concrete was cold, unforgiving. Her jeans did nothing to soften the bite. The boys stepped in closer, tightening the circle. Shadows merged into threat. "Good," Brandon said. "Now you're going to crawl to each of us, beg for forgiveness, and bark like the dog you are. If you do it well enough, maybe I'll give you back Daddy's bracelet." He dangled the silver just out of reach. Madison's fingers brushed the ground. The position was familiar, trained. She could feel every muscle in her body recalling years of jujitsu. From here, on her hands and knees, she wasn't powerless. She was poised. Brandon didn't see it. None of them did. They saw a girl broken, a girl crushed, a girl who'd crawl. "I'm waiting," Brandon sneered. "Let's hear that apology. Make it good." Madison took a breath. Somewhere in the school, her brother was pretending this wasn't happening. Somewhere in Seattle, her father lay beneath a headstone. And here, surrounded by cowards, she was about to teach them a lesson they'd never forget. I'm sorry, she said clearly. The words tasted like rust, but she continued. I'm sorry for standing up to you. I'm sorry I didn't let you drown Nathan. I'm sorry I defended my brother. I'm sorry I exist in your world where kindness is weakness. Louder, Brandon barked. Crawl, bark. The boys laughed. Jake's phone recorded every second. But what they didn't see, what they never saw, was how her body shifted, how her weight adjusted, how her limbs coiled like a trap waiting to spring. They were too busy celebrating, too drunk on power, too blind to danger crawling at their feet. That's right, Brandon said, stepping closer. Now bark for Daddy's bracelet. Bark like the dog you are. Madison stopped moving, her hands pressed into the ground. Her head tilted up toward him. And for the first time since she entered the gym, she smiled. You wanted a dog? She whispered. Dogs bite. Brandon's smirk vanished. Too late. Her hand shot out like lightning, grabbing Connor's ankle and yanking with the precision of a trained grappler. His body collapsed sideways, his scream cut short as his head hit the floor with a dull crack. Then came the snap, his ankle twisting, ligaments tearing, the sound like a branch breaking in a storm. Madison was already moving. Ryan lunged forward, but she rolled with grace, catching his leg mid-step and locking it into a heel hook, firm, unshakable. Don't move, she warned, pressure building in her grip. Unless you want to spend 6 months learning to walk again. Jake screamed, dropped his phone, scrambled backward, forgetting the first rule of a group fight. Never turn your back on the threat. She released Ryan and rolled into a crouch, sweeping Jake's knee from behind. He fell hard, nose colliding with concrete. Blood poured from his face as he shrieked, You broke my nose! Madison stood over him, calm as still water. No, she said, that was the floor. I just introduced you. Alex backed away, hands raised. I'm out, he gasped. I'm not part of this. Sit, she said, hands on your head. Move, and you join them. He obeyed immediately, and then there was one. Brandon stood frozen, chest heaving, confidence gone. Around him, his crew writhed in pain. Connor moaning, Ryan afraid to breathe, Jake bleeding, Alex trembling. You can't do this, Brandon stammered. This is assault. You're going to jail. Madison rose slowly, deliberately. Dust floated between them like sparks in the aftermath of a fire. Like when you assaulted Nathan, she asked. Like when you locked my brother in a closet for 4 hours? Like when you wore my father's bracelet like a trophy? Brandon backed away. That was just kids being kids. Madison's voice dropped to ice. That's what they say when someone like you ruins lives and walks away smiling. He reached for the bracelet, unclasped it with shaking fingers. Here, take it, we're even. She stared at the silver, at the boy offering it, at the coward who had broken so many and expected mercy. We're not even close to even. He turned to run. Bad choice. She pivoted on one foot, sweeping his legs clean from beneath him. For a second he hung in the air, weightless. Then gravity claimed him, spine first. He landed with a thud, gasping for air. Before he could rise, she was on him, knee pressing into his chest, arm trapping his leg. Please, he wheezed. Please don't. Madison's eyes didn't blink. Did Nathan say please when you held his head in a toilet? I'm sorry. Did Ethan say please when he was crying in that closet? Did he beg? Ah! She shifted, locking his ankle. One twist and he'd never play again. Then Madison, wait. A new voice cut through the air. Coach Torres stood at the entrance, eyes wide, jaw set. Let him go, he said, stepping carefully through the aftermath. You've made your point. Have her voice cracked for the first time. They've made their point for years. No one stopped them. I know, and I'm sorry, Torres said. We failed you. But this isn't who you are. This isn't what your father taught you. She froze. You knew my father? Master Sergeant David Pierce. 3 tours, Bronze Star. He trained at my gym in Seattle. Taught kids every weekend. Talked about you like you hung the stars. Tears welled in Madison's eyes. They hurt Ethan, she whispered. They'll face consequences, Torres promised. Real ones I've been recording since I walked in. This goes to the police, the school board, the state. Madison looked down at Brandon. Terrified, powerless, exactly as he had made others feel. She thought of her father's hands, gentle and strong, and then she let go. Brandon crawled to the wall and curled up, sobbing. Madison picked up the bracelet, warm from the floor, and slipped it onto her wrist. The war was over. But this time, the right side won. The video went live before the police even finished taking statements. Olivia Chen, quiet girl from English class had been filming the whole time, hidden in the shadows near the bleachers, her phone steady in shaking hands. By the time the sun dipped behind Lincoln High, her live stream had crossed 50,000 views. By morning, it had tripled. No one was laughing anymore. The footage was undeniable. 5 boys circling one girl like wolves. Voices caught on camera, clear as truth. Crawl like a dog. Bark for daddy's bracelet. And then, the moment it all turned, the takedowns, the precision, the control, the justice. Comments poured in like a tidal wave. This is what happens when schools fail to protect. She didn't just survive. She changed the rules. They thought no one would stand up. Then Madison stood. By the end of the day, hashtags like #TeamMadison and Madison the Warrior were trending nationwide. Grace Mitchell found Madison outside the nurse's office, tears streaking down her face. "I'm sorry," she whispered, voice breaking. "I should have said something. I should have helped." Madison looked at her, not with anger, but with understanding. "Fear," she said, "is what they count on." Grace nodded, then stepped aside to let Olivia give Madison a small hug. "You're a hero," Olivia said softly. When Madison finally walked out of the school, Ethan was waiting in the parking lot with their aunt. The moment he saw her, he ran, full sprint, straight into her arms. "I saw the video," he gasped. "Everyone saw it. Maddie, you were like something out of an action movie." She hugged him tighter than she ever had before. "I'm sorry you had to see that." "Are you kidding?" he grinned. "My sister's a superhero." That night, the house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant buzz of news vans gathering outside the school. Madison sat on her bed, staring at her father's photo. The bracelet was back on her wrist, warm now like it remembered her. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. She didn't need to ask. "I'm sorry for everything. You were right. I was a monster. I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed you to know. Brandon." She stared at the message for a long time. Then, without emotion, she deleted it. Too late. The next morning, her phone rang again. It was Coach Torres. "Thought you should know. The school board met last night, emergency session, real zero tolerance policy going forward. They're also starting a self-defense program, mandatory for freshmen, optional for everyone else." "That's good," Madison said quietly. "We want you to help teach it." She blinked. "Me? Who better?" Torres said. "You've shown these kids they don't have to be victims, that they can stand up. Your father would want his knowledge passed on." She didn't answer right away. She looked at her bracelet, at her knuckles, at the faint bruises and the strength beneath them. Then she said, "Okay, I'll do it." Weeks passed, then months, then a year. At graduation, Madison stood at the podium as valedictorian. Her blue gown shimmered under the lights. Her voice was clear, calm, steady. "Strength isn't measured by who you can hurt," she said, scanning the auditorium, finding Ethan in the front row, sitting proudly beside their mom. "It's measured by who you can protect, by who you lift up. My father taught me how to fight, but more importantly, when not to. He taught me that true warriors build peace, not chaos, that they protect communities, not destroy them." The room was silent. Then applause rose like a wave, 5 straight minutes of standing ovation. In the back row, 5 familiar faces sat quietly. Brandon and his former crew, no longer football stars, just boys finishing their GEDs through alternative programs, watching the girl they once tried to break rise. On Madison's wrist was her father's bracelet. Beside it, a second one, a gift from the martial arts school her father once trained with. It read, "Warrior Teacher." Outside the gym, Katie, a freshman barely 90 pounds, waited nervously by the mat of the new self-defense studio. "I just wanted to say thank you," she whispered. "After your video went viral, I finally told my parents about my stepbrother. He's in custody now, because you showed me it was okay to fight back." Madison hugged her gently. Behind them, Nathan Chen, now her assistant instructor, demonstrated a takedown. Strong, confident, no longer a boy who'd been forced to drink from a toilet, but someone standing taller than he ever had. Madison smiled. She'd lost her father, but his legacy lived on, in every student she taught, every voice she lifted. Every moment she stood between pain and peace. This wasn't just a fight story. It was a legacy story. And as she walked toward the window, sunlight catching the silver on her wrist, Madison whispered to herself,